Royce White won his Senate primary in Minnesota, knocking off Joe Frazier. He'll be running against Amy Klobuchar in the November election. I got some mixed feelings about Royce. I'm sure those of you that follow the show aren't surprised, but I'm going to unpack them today. Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I'm Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining me. We have an awesome show planned for you today. Shemeka Michelle, T.J. will join us. Anthony Walker, Virgil Walker, Kevin Donahue will join me for some Tennessee Harmony. Make sure you're also checking out that extra Fearless content. You got to be a Blaze TV subscriber. Go to blazetv.com/fearless. Use the promo code Fearless, and you can save $20 on your yearly subscription. Let's get right into it. Last night, there were some primaries in Minnesota, and the big news, there seemed to be two pieces of big news. Ilhan Omar held on to her seat or won the Democratic primary. She was not run out like other members of the squad have been, Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. That seemed to be big news that Omar held on, but it seemed to be overshadowed, and maybe that's just the way my social media feeds are rigged, but it just seemed to be a bit overshadowed by Royce White on the Republican side winning his primary race against Joe Frazier. Not that Joe Frazier, the boxer. Some guy in Minnesota. Royce was the preferred candidate of the Republican Party, so I was not that surprised that he won. But the way everyone else has reacted, they're acting like this is a big surprise, that Royce, I think, got 40% of the vote and, won pretty handedly. And the way my social media feeds were operating and rigged and information, people were acting like this is a really big deal. And to some degree it is. Royce is a former NBA player who had problems in the National Basketball Association related to mental health, related to anxiety, related to a feud back and forth between he and the NBA about how he should be treated. And he's, kind of a candidate from out of nowhere. He's been adopted and developed by Steve Bannon. You guys, of course, know Steve Bannon from War Room, and he's one of the great political operatives, the guy that helped Trump get elected in 2016, a man who's sitting in jail, in prison right now, wrongfully, in my view, for what? He wouldn't comply with a subpoena or whatever. It's BS. But Steve Bannon is someone I respect, and Steve Bannon's relationship with Royce is what has made Royce interesting and viable. Royce has branded himself as ultra MAGA and the ultimate Trump supporter. He's partnered with Steve Bannon to burnish that brand, and it does say something about the Republican Party and who's in control here. Trump eventually endorsed Royce in this race, but the Republican Party had already endorsed Royce. But obviously, those of you that have followed this show know that a year ago, perhaps, I think it was a year ago, Royce and I had a falling out. Royce made regular appearances on this show and was a respected member of the Fearless Army and someone who played a role on this show. I'm going to walk you through where I'm at on Royce and why I can't give a full-throated, hey, I'm happy Royce is, running for Senate in Minnesota, and it's going to expand his platform and expand his voice. And even if he gets clobbered by Amy Klobuchar, it'll be nice because Royce will have a bigger voice and a bigger platform moving forward. as you've heard me acknowledge, I think it was just last week or the week before, like Royce and his appearances on this show and my previous relationship with Royce really, really helped me understand the role of the Federal Reserve and central banking in the corruption of America. It was something before Royce made it a constant theme on this show. It's something I had given very little thought and had very little understanding of. And here I am 2 years later, and I was like, man, and I've had to acknowledge, like, Royce White was right, man. He was dead over the target. I thank Royce for opening my eyes and sending me down that path. So I want to give Royce his credit there. And I want to be crystal clear. There's no way I think people should vote for Amy Klobuchar. She's a Democrat. The stuff that the Democrats support, to me, make them off limits. As long as they're the party of abortion, as long as they're the party of the alphabet mafia and drag queens and all, as long as they're the party of Black Lives Matter, as long as they're the party of identity politics, it's just, I can't do it. And so it doesn't matter who they run over there or who they run against. The Democrat Party is off limits for me. And so, I'm locked in to some degree in support of Royce White, but I'm not locked in, and there's a reason why, and I know this irritates a lot of you all, but Royce kind of exemplifies my reluctance to vote and to really participate. I will endorse. I've told you all I love MAGA. I told you all I really like Donald Trump, and I certainly have created a show that anyone that watches would be like, yeah, Jason Whitlock thinks you should vote for Donald Trump. But I have some real skepticism about Royce White, and so many of you will think it's all personal, so I want to just unpack what my skepticism is, what it's rooted in, without putting, I'm going to try my best not to put Royce on blast, because I really, any Senate seat that would go to a Republican would be a win, in my opinion. It doesn't appear, I think Klobuchar she's served 4 terms. It doesn't appear she's going to get unseated. It's a long shot if Royce could pull that off, but who knows? In this year, who knows what can happen between now and November 5th. But I just, for those of you that maybe just started watching the show or maybe have forgotten, let me walk you through a little bit of the history. Not going to play the clips. I'm just going to tell you, you have to go look it up yourself. But Royce and I got crossways about a year ago because Royce came on the show and started taking pot shots at Mark Levin. Mark Levin is a member of the Blaze family. You guys know him from Fox News. You know him from his popular podcast, his radio show. And just in real time, I couldn't, like, what's going on? What is this about? He was just dragging Mark Levin into a conversation that didn't require Mark Levin. And then there was an insinuation after the fact that Mark Levin somehow was exercising some control over me. And so when the show was over, I sent Royce a text about, like, hey, man, what are you doing? And just some gentle, like, hey, people can't always connect the dots on what you're talking about. Slow it down and speak in smaller chunks and just, you got to unpack these things when you're so far ahead of everyone else's conversation. You got to unpack these things a bit slower so that even I can understand them and the audience can understand them. That set Royce off. Now I sent him a polite text message with some instructions. It's my show. I'm trying to help him be better on my show. At the time, we were using Royce more infrequently than I would have preferred because Royce would always go so far out ahead of the conversation and he would avoid really participating in the conversation that I've outlined and want to go and make his own points. And so it came Roy started coming on the show maybe once every 8-9 days or so, less frequently than I would have preferred. So I was trying to give him some feedback on, hey man, if you do this, I can have you on the show more often. That's private conversation between Royce and I. Royce and I are friends. I've met Royce's wife. I don't know if it's his wife or not, but wife, woman he has 2 kids with, been to dinner with him, done some things for them. And so I'm having a private conversation. I look up and Royce has done an entire podcast based off a private conversation he and I were having over text message. And I'm like, holy cow. Royce White has taken my private text messages and is now using them as content for a show. Well, this was a clear violation of our friendship. And then as you listen to the rest of the podcast, he's telling everybody what I should be doing on this show. Royce was frustrated. Royce thought we talked too much sports on this show for his liking. And he probably attributed the frequency of his appearances on the show to, well, they're just talking too much sports. He couldn't hear me when I'm saying, well, Royce, no, you're talking in a way that is hard to understand. I can't keep up. Some of the audience can't keep up. It's not as effective. And again, these things weren't all spelled out in the text, but most I was trying, there are opportunities to make all the points you want to make while still loosely discussing sports. The reason why I know that is because that's what I do virtually every day on this show. I use the sports world as a way to talk about the real world. And I find ways, just like we did yesterday, to talk about Allen Iverson and Donald Trump. And there's just clever ways to do it. And again, it's my show. I'm playing to my strengths. It's not Royce White's show. So I'm listening to this podcast where he's talking about private text messages between he and I. He seems angry, and then he's complaining about what type of show I'm doing. And I was like, well, this just violates everything that I hold valuable as it relates to a friend. I can't have a friend who's taking my private conversation and making a show and making it content for themselves. And so I remove myself from Royce White's world, and I remove Royce White from my world. I'm not angry with Royce. I don't have any bitterness towards Royce. I have sympathy for Royce. He has some anxiety issues and other issues. I'm disappointed that, like, oh wow, his values and my values don't align here, and that made me like reassess. You know, you have one of those moments where you go, well, hold on, have I been running past red flags this entire time I've been engaged with this person? Because I certainly just didn't anticipate that this man would have as low a character as it takes to take private conversations between 2 friends. And again, I'm going to share some things not to embarrass Royce, but to provide further context for you all to understand. But, you know, like Royce White would visit Nashville or visited Nashville and needed me to rent him a car so that he could get him, his woman, and his kids back to Minneapolis. And I like Royce. I was supportive of Royce. I was sympathetic towards Royce. Royce has anxiety issues because we were willing to fly Royce back to Minneapolis, but he didn't want to fly. And so it ended up costing me money out of my own pocket for Royce to have a car for 2, 3, 4 days. I don't remember because they made stops along the way back to Minneapolis or whatever. But when your friendship level goes to that, we're like, I'm helping you and your wife or woman, baby mama, and kids get back to Minneapolis on my dime. When the friendship level goes, you're not expecting that person because you send them a text message with feedback on how they can be better on the show, taking no personal swipes at them, nothing, just feedback. And others, I mentioned, because the way he went off, I was like, look at what I wrote. Does it really require this sort of response? There's nothing harsh in here. There's no personal attacks on Royce. This guy just flew off the handle for no reason, but it just violated things like, well, this isn't a friend of mine. And this person seems a bit unstable. And so it made me take a harder look at Royce. And things that I had been ignoring and write, oh, that person emailing me this or that, or this person tweeting at me this or that, those are just haters. I'm going to ignore them. They just don't like Royce. Well, after this event happens, I say, well, let me take a look. And that's when I discovered that Royce White, out of his own mouth in 2020, shortly after the election, wrote that he was a Biden voter. And he did this on his own Twitter feed, and I was like, wow. You know, someone had like tweeted at me months earlier, you know, Royce is a Biden voter, and I just laughed it off. And then I hunted down, I was like, holy cow. He did. Out of his own mouth, he said this. Or out of his own Twitter feed, and he's come up with some excuse that some intern or staffer or whatever at this time in 2020, it's baloney. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. He doesn't have staffers, interns, all. It's hot garbage. And then it just made me go, well, voted for Biden in 2020, came on the scene and drew attention to himself by hosting Black Lives Matter George Floyd rallies. And I was like, oh, ooh. And I've heard Royce say, I took these protesters to the Federal Reserve, and that's what I was doing. And it's a way of dressing up his support of his initial support of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And then when you combine that with, and he says he voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I'm like, oh. And I'm like, maybe I've been fooled all along. Maybe, and I said it at the time, I was like, man, this smells like a plant. How does a guy go from voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, leading the Black Lives Matter rally, this is all in 2020, to now in 2022 and 2023, he's beating his chest and he's the ultimate MAGA person. How? And overlooked it, or initially overlooked it, and then did the research, and then you just hold on to, well, hold on. Steve Bannon is no fool. No way Steve Bannon is vouching for a guy that's weak or you know is fraudulent. But then when I started just further, and this took a couple of days for me to just collect my thoughts and figure out, how did this happen? How did a guy that I thought was a friend, who I was willing to help, who would call me, called me later, you feed a cat once, and of course they're going to come back. The person's going to call me, and they're trying to get me to rent them another car so they could drive to New York, I think from Dallas. And then you just start thinking, well, hold on. Royce says he doesn't have anxiety over flying, but he's renting cars and driving across America. And he's telling everybody, he comes on my show, he tells everybody that, he has no anxiety over flying and that the NBA ran him out for no reason and he was willing to fly. And I'm seeing like clear signs like, wow, this guy struggles to fly. And I'm not mocking him or criticizing him for that. I'm criticizing him for not being transparent about it. It's a different version. It's not stolen valor like Tim Walz, but it's not the kind of transparency that I believe in here at Fearless. I let all my flaws hang out and all of my struggles, and I'm just radically transparent on this show, and at some point, you just want other people to be influenced by you. They don't have to be as transparent as you, but they have to be a tiny bit transparent. This is similar to, and I'm not remotely trying to disparage this person. I'm just trying to give you all the information of what goes on in my head and why I make the decisions that I do. But it's similar to like part of the struggle I had with Uncle Jimmy. Jimmy, great guy, comes from a tough background, but he could never be transparent about who he was and what his struggles were. And it always left him trying to project a certain image rather than project the truth. And it got frustrating for me because what I would try to get Jimmy to do is just say, hey, you know, I used to make that mistake. I used to think that way. And thank God I now understand the flaws of my way. And Jimmy wouldn't do that because I think he thought it was too embarrassing to talk openly about the mistakes that he made. Jim, as we would joke on the show or revealed on the show, had a baby mama issue. But was unwilling to talk about it in a mature way, and it just falls flat on the show. This show is about transparency. That's why I love Shemeka Michelle. She's made a lot of mistakes. She runs from none of them. She's a transparent, authentic person. That's where I struggled with Royce. And when I started evaluating, like, okay, clearly you've misjudged this person. What mistakes have you made? What red lights have you passed over? And at the end of the day, because Royce is a Trump-like figure as it relates to being flawed. But there's a major flaw that makes me uncomfortable with Royce and makes me just say, hey, what is all this about? Why is he hiding? Why do I don't feel beyond the betrayal? Why don't I feel comfortable with Royce? And it's because Royce, at whatever age he is, 32, 33 years old, he's a grown man with kids, with several baby mamas, and he's not really self-sufficient. And that's a red flag for leadership. And so let's say that Donald Trump has all the same red flags or flaws as Royce White. And it's like, Jason, you don't have a problem supporting Donald Trump. Why would you have one for Royce White? Donald Trump strikes me as self-sufficient for a long time. And maybe his father giving him hundreds of $millions helped him, or 20 million or 200 million. I don't know what it was. Maybe that helps him be self-sufficient. Whatever the reason is, Donald Trump seems self-sufficient, able to take care of himself, able to take care of the kids that he created, able to take care of the wives that he's married. When you're not self-sufficient, it opens you up to being compromised. It opens you up to being a plant and cutting deals. And it opens you up. You're just more vulnerable. And so that's the major difference. When I look at Donald Trump, I look at someone and say, you know what? He's got some personality quirks and behavior quirks that I don't like. He's been married 3 times, blah, 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 all that. But he doesn't need anybody to help him. He's self-sufficient. He can stand on his own 2 feet. When the pharmaceutical companies, when the Soros family, when the Rothschilds, when the central bankers, when whatever say, hey man, I got some money for you if you'll hop on board with this or that, Donald Trump doesn't need the money. And so that's the brilliance of what Royce really educated me on and this audience on about the central banks and the Federal Reserve. That the lender is your slave master. And the lender loves debt slaves. The lender loves people who aren't self-sufficient. The people that are looking for people that they can compromise love people who struggle to fly themselves to work. They love dependent people. And so that's where I am uncomfortable with Royce. Lack of self-sufficiency. And then when I look at voting for Biden and Harris, hosting a BLM rally, I look and say, can I fully trust Royce? Not going to support Klobuchar, not going to support any Democrat, but some wholehearted endorsement of Royce, I can't do it. And it's not just about what transpired between me and Royce. It comes down to meeting some simple requirements. It's like an elder in a church, generally speaking, has to have built a strong family. It's like, I'm not qualified to be an elder in a church. I'm not qualified to be a minister in a church. Haven't built a family. And then when you get to the minister, the kids got to be well behaved and all this other stuff. And I don't know about the behavior of Royce's kids. I'm not remotely going there. What I am saying is, if you look at what has been pointed out in articles, that Royce and his child support issues, Royce and he seemed to have copped to taking campaign money and blowing it at a strip club. That's a vulnerable person. That's a person that doesn't have enough discipline for me to place my full trust in them. He's incredibly flawed. And it makes me wonder who's got their hooks in him or who potentially could get their hooks in him. And where this is a bit dangerous for the Republican Party, because here's how I think as I read Twitter or X last night and looked at the way people were reacting to Royce winning this, they're going to use Royce as an avatar or a poster, a billboard. Hey, this is what MAGA and Trump has created. Royce White embodies what MAGA wants the new Republican Party to look like. And it'll be an irresponsible athlete who struggles to travel anywhere, struggles to be self-sufficient, has allegations of unpaid child support. That's because I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm no political expert, but this Klobuchar has been trouncing all of her opponents, and Minnesota leans really left. And so it's really unlikely that Royce is going to win this Senate seat. Maybe he will. Maybe it'll be the biggest shock in the world. But what's more likely is he will be used as a punching bag to define MAGA as a party so irresponsible that they would run a candidate who can't pay his child support, has 3 baby mamas, afraid to fly, anxiety, mental health issues, and kind of flim-flammy on what his positions are. Hey, I voted for Biden and Harris just 4 years ago. I led Black Lives Matter rallies just 4 years ago. He seems like a prop to frame MAGA as, really, really irresponsible about who they promote. And you could sit there and say, hey, that's no different than the Democrats and John Fetterman. Okay. He'll be used as a justification for, hey, you guys want to complain about the squad? You want to complain about Cori Bush? You want to complain about AOC? You want to complain about Fetterman? You want to complain about our unqualified candidates? Look at that basketball player that you guys just put up. So I know that sounds hypercritical of Royce White. I know many of you won't like it, but it's my real thoughts. I hope that Royce is a different person. I hope that Royce matures. I hope that Royce doesn't do anything to embarrass Trump, the MAGA movement, Steve Bannon. I hope. But based off of, what I've seen from him, based off of me giving Royce zero negative energy and nothing but help and support, and then seeing how Royce returned that favor to me, I'm a little bit skeptical. And so I'm going to sit on the sidelines and observe and tell you all to be careful attaching your credibility to Royce White. I did that, and I paid a price for it. And running behind, I get Royce is in the party and says the right things that, he supports the right policies. And I'm telling you, the guy, as relates to the Federal Reserve, guy was dead on. As it relates to helping me understand, and I'm going to go all the way here and get myself in trouble, but, some of what Royce has said about secular Jewish people, accurate, eye-opening. It just flat out. I reject the people that want to frame Royce as an anti-Semite. I don't think he is. I think he's someone who was bold enough to talk about what he's seen, what he studied, and what he believes. But just like he tried to do me and tried to say, hey, Jason Whitlock, Mark Levin's got puppet strings on Jason Whitlock, and it's not that I'm defensive, it's just so inaccurate and wrong. And then the guy tried to have an argument with me about who owns the Blaze. It was all a joke. And it was like, is Royce trying to put me in the trick bag? Is he trying to stir up problems for me? I stir up problems for myself all the time. I interviewed E. Michael Jones on this show. And I still talk about E. Michael Jones because I like his books. I put my own self in the trick bag. I don't need Royce White trying to shove me there. It's not his role. It's disrespectful. It's disloyal. So it's hard for me to jump on board with someone as disloyal as Royce White because it makes me wonder, what else are they unethical about? The guy that voted for Biden and Harris in 2020 is the ultimate MAGA person in 2024? Smells fishy to me. I'll get some thoughts from Shemeka Michelle, get a few thoughts from T.J. Moe on this. T.J. Moe and I are going to talk about Kirk Herbstreit as well. Kirk had some interesting things to say yesterday about drawing a line in the sand. And we'll do some Tennessee Harmony too. Before I move on to Shemeka Michelle, I want to talk to you guys about our great friends at Preborn. I hope you're supporting Preborn because no group, no organization supports our worldview that life begins at conception as well and as effectively as Preborn. Preborn provides expectant mothers ultrasounds. And if that mother is considering abortion, once she hears that baby's heartbeat, sees the image of that baby in her womb, she is now twice as likely to choose life. Preborn then steps in, steps up, provides that mother the support she needs throughout the pregnancy and throughout the first 2 years of the baby's life outside the womb. Our money, just $28 pays for one ultrasound, $140 pays for 5. Our money goes for ultrasounds and diapers and all the stuff a kid would need. It doesn't go to buy vacation homes for mid-level management. It's 2 ways to give. Pound 250, say the keyword baby, pound 250 keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/fearless. That's preborn.com/fearless. Please continue to support preborn. It's vital to our mission. All right, when we come back, Shemeka Michelle next. Welcome back to Beef. As I walk you through my top 50 media beefs of all time. Yeah, I'm an equal opportunity beefer. It's like, Randy, are you asleep at the wheel? Big lips are in style. I'd love to squash this beef. I mean, I was not real happy at all. I was less than thrilled. I was displeased. And now we have beef. If you love Fearless, you're going to love our Fearless merchandise. Go to fearlessarmyshop.com today to pick up your Roll Call 2.0 gear, grab a t-shirt, hat, or pick up a pair of Fearless dog tags. Go to fearlessarmyshop.com today. All right, welcome back. I want to bring Shemeka Michelle into my conversation about Royce White because one of the things that they're going to hit Royce White with is Royce saying something that I actually believe, that women have gotten too mouthy. They're hammering with Royce with this everywhere, that, you know, he's some sort of misogynist. Let's play the clip of Royce. I think he's talking to Steve Bannon here. And man, the left is fired up about this.
Let's just be frank. Women have become too mouthy. As the black man in the room, I'll say that. I don't know whether we're talking white men or Asian men or black men or so on and so forth. But no, I mean, I'm serious. I mean, there was the thing that is scary about it. And then I say this, and people will go, "Oh,
hold it." Can I officially say that Joy Reid's Black Girl Magic does not work with Royce White? Can we just? I just want to make sure. Don't take it from me. I just want Royce to say it.
You know you're going to send me off. You go to Joy Ann Reid, and if she's wearing a white woman's wigs, you're going to piss me off this afternoon. I'm having a beautiful day without thinking about that scam.
So some people are upset. How dare he say that women have gotten too mouthy? Shemeka, your thoughts?
Listen, it's just the truth, Jason. As we have seen, especially over the course of the last 3 weeks, women are out of control. I actually had to quote tweet one of them today because she was saying that men who aren't voting for Kamala Harris needs to be quiet, need to stop whining and stop being so soft. If you're not going to vote for her, just don't, but stop complaining about it. Yet, if you say the same thing back to a woman, which I did, of course, then it's a problem. So I do think that women have become too mouthy, but thankfully, God has raised me up as a woman who can actually stand toe-to-toe with some of these loudmouth heifers.
I'm going to play a clip from one of those loudmouth women. I saw this over social media yesterday, and I thought of it again this morning when I was thinking about Royce winning, and it was like, I think this is the woman Royce is talking about. Just she didn't even have to open her mouth. Just look at the shirt. This is what Royce is talking about.
I think it's really exciting and encouraging to see a woman and potentially have the first African-American woman be in her position. She's trying to create a world where people all have their rights to their own decisions, their bodies, their choices, women's rights. Definitely crucial, definitely something that I look for as a woman who has a daughter. I want her to be able to have a right to her own body. We talk about it every day, all the time. And that's something that's central for me in bringing me out and making sure that I vote and rally everybody around me to vote also.
Black women are going to save this country, and Royce is standing between them and saving the country, I guess, or that's what's going to be argued. For your thoughts on the woman in her shirt, and then I want to swing back to Royce White and just, what do you think of my position on Royce? Anyway, your thoughts on the woman in the shirt, then I'll ask you a follow-up.
Okay. So Black women will save this country, yet they've raised two generations of sassy thugs on the whole I don't need a man ideology. So no, I don't think Black women will save this country. And I've said it before that I actually think men will save this country. And when it comes to the Black community, I'm looking at Black men to actually save this country. So, or to save the Black community. So I think she's wrong. And it just, as a mom with three children, I am not fighting for abortion. What I am teaching them in our home, first of all, is to marry before you carry. Don't be sluts. Don't be whores. Don't be irresponsible. Be accountable for the actions that you take. And that's what I'm teaching them. So it pains me when I see a woman, shout out for your natural hair, because we know some of them don't like themselves, but it pains me to hear a woman say that I have a daughter and so I'm voting for Kamala Harris because I want her to have those rights. Your daughter has the right to carry herself with class. Your daughter has the right to make decisions before a baby is ever conceived. And I think those are the lessons that we need to be teaching young girls, not to go out here and be on some slut walk so that they can just use abortion as a method of birth control. I don't like that that's the message that we are sending. Teach your children mama's baby always. And if you make a baby, if you lay down with dogs, you may get up with fleas. So I just think that we're sending the wrong message. And I get so frustrated with women when that's the reason they claim they're voting for Kamala Harris. And as a woman with a daughter, you're sending your daughter the wrong message, lady. Just the wrong message.
Now to Royce. I think you heard my take on Royce and my hesitancy to jump on board with Royce. Obviously, I know you're going to say what you think and don't concern yourself with my feelings. What did you think of my take, and how do you feel about Royce as a candidate for the Senate?
You know, if I was looking to be Royce's wife, then he may be a red flag. I mean, in some areas, not all. But, I hear what you're saying about masculinity. And I do think that as a society, we're so starved for it that people like Royce and people like Trump, they are able to present themselves as providers and protectors, because we see so many weak men that we really just ignore any other thing. And we want somebody who's going to be, stand 10 toes down, who's not going to back down to the establishment, who's not going to be weak. And that's what we desire. And I think that Royce, whether he wins against Amy or not, he has a chance in politics because we're starved for that. And we want a man or men that, women are going to flock to someone like Royce. Men are going to admire him simply because we got so many beta males in society. Let's just be honest. And he presents himself as the, take no SHIT, and this is the man that you need. So I do think he has a chance. And I'm actually proud of him for what he has done in Minnesota as far as being able to get this nomination. But, I don't know what's going to happen with Amy, but I see that he stands a chance in politics.
I certainly agree with your take that Royce puts on a very masculine persona, and Trump does as well. And there is just an incredible short supply of that, and so it's more valuable. However, Royce presents also a hot mess of, can't fly here or there. That seems pretty tough for a senator, and maybe occasionally he does fly, but I do know is not all the time because I've been involved. And his problems with child support and other allegations, I just think a tiny bit problematic, burdens that Trump Trump presents as the ultimate provider. Royce presents as, if I get this job in the Senate, I'll be able to catch up on my child support. Problematic?
When I hear that could be problematic. I just started feeling silly because I'm thinking, can't fly here, can't fly there, can't fly anywhere. I started hearing Dr. Seuss. But I think, again, because we have such a lack of it right now in this phase of society, people are going to overlook that. I was telling my best friend about Royce's interview when he was talking about the whole strip club fiasco and how they were saying, you're spending campaign funds on the strip club. And I was so shocked that Royce took the stance of saying there are good chicken wings in the strip club, and they bought it. And it was like, for me, my goodness, we are so starved that, 10 years ago, people would not have taken that as an answer. But right now, they're taking that as an answer. And, I kind of joke that I don't know if the chicken wings are good in the strip club or not, because I couldn't eat on the job. So, but the fact that they have bought that answer just says to me, people are so hungry and starved for someone that they think will actually bring change, or someone that they think won't cower to the establishment. They don't even care. 5 years from now, people may care again. I just think right now, people just don't.
Shemeka, thank you so much. I'm going to get T.J. Moe's take here in a second. Great job as always. Hey, guys, the pandemic may be behind us, but the social and economic ramifications, they still affect us today. Here at The Blaze, we're not going to be distracted from telling you the truth about who's responsible for the pandemic and the cover-up of COVID-19. Matt Kibbe and Senator Rand Paul have put together episode 2 of the cover-up, the documentary series where where Senator Paul walks you through the lies and the crimes of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he works to expose the people protecting Dr. Fauci. Senator Paul's relentless pursuit of truth will reveal the insanity behind the gain-of-function research, the people responsible, and who needs to be held accountable. From his contentious hearings with Fauci to his attempts to expose agencies like the NIH and the DOD, Senator Paul has made it his mission to find out why the government is funding dangerous research and bring to light the lies that completely damage this country. Our lives were forever changed by their deception, and together here at The Blaze, we intend to make sure that it never happens again. To watch the latest installment in the series, go to FauciCoverUp.com/Whitlock and use the promo code FauciLied to get $30 off an annual subscription. T.J. Moe, next.
This is very nice, Stephen A.
Well,
it looks really nice.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it does. It really, really does. You look nice yourself.
Thank you.
As always,
Out.
And who said I do first between the two of you, by the way?
Oh, my
Who
gosh.
said I do first?
Who said I don't?
But I just had to step on out. No, there's nothing going on. You understand? I'm saying America been lying about that for a couple of years.
Oh, they do?
But here's the upside to all of that. They know my taste. You gay and that's what you want to do. Cool. It does mean that First Take not only is a #1 show because of our content, we look the part.
Over the hills of snow.
All right, welcome back. T.J. Moe, I want to start with Royce White, and then we'll transition to Kirk Herbstreit. T.J., you heard my explanation on why I'm a bit uncomfortable being enthusiastic about Royce winning that Minnesota primary. I think Royce is going to be used as a billboard to say, look at MAGA, look at how crazy they complain about our squad. Royce is an example of their squad. He's worse than Fetterman. He's worse than Jamal Bowman. He's worse than Cori Bush. Anyway, your thoughts, Royce White winning the Republican primary in Minnesota.
Yeah, so I mean, I have personal issues with how Royce treated you and, you know, some of how he's conducted himself in his personal life and things like that. But as far as being able to use him for a billboard, I think that that ship has sailed so far away. We're in a different galaxy in politics. You mentioned John Fetterman. I mean, the guy had a stroke, couldn't speak, and they still elected him to the United States Senate. Joe Biden's brain did not work. He's got a crackhead son. He probably molested his own daughter, and everybody pretended he was the greatest thing in the world for 3 years until finally they had to discard him. The Democratic nominee today slept her way to the top. Everybody pretty much knows this and agrees on it. She has not held a single press conference or had an adversarial question aimed towards her since she became the de facto nominee nearly a month ago, and nobody seems to care. So this idea that, you know, well, this just isn't going to work in politics and we can hold him up at a billboard, absolutely not. I think there is zero chance of him being used in a negative way to hurt the GOP. We have had this conversation over the last year or so that people want masculinity. Royce is 6'8". He's a tough-looking dude. He talks tough. He's extremely intellectually gifted. And so he sounds pretty good during the debates. I watched clips from his debate. He did well. I mean, he's very good. He can think on his feet. He knows where to turn the screws. The guy's good. Do I think he stands a chance in Minnesota? Probably not. Amy Klobuchar wins her elections by an average about 25 points. And again, do I have personal qualms with Royce White? Absolutely, I do. Yes. And we could talk about those separately. But as it relates to politics, I don't think any of that matters at all. I think the only reason Royce loses is because he's in Minnesota, not because he's got all these personal problems. I think politically they are irrelevant.
That's fascinating. I'll have to ponder that. I want to move on because, you know, I've already said enough personally about Royce. I don't want to do that anymore. Kirk Herbstreit, he's on with Dan Dockage over at Outkick and made some really strong comments about, he had tweeted something maybe a week ago about, hey, look, you know, men don't belong in girls' sports. I was like, oh, look at that tweet. That's interesting. And now he's doubled down in an interview with Dockage. Let's play the clip.
Hey, did you get any blowback on talking about men should not play women's sports?
I could say it's a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, and people would be offended. Right. Wednesday would be offended that I didn't say anything nice about Wednesday. So that's the world you live in.
What made you come out? What made you come out and respond to that? Because a lot of people are afraid to get into that conversation, swim in those waters.
I think I've been biting my tongue on a lot of topics for 3 years, and so I happened to see somebody say what he said. I think he said, should men be able to play in women's sports? And I just was like, I'm just going to give a quick answer. You know, ridiculous question. Of course not.
You had don't come on here and bullshit me. You had to know that when you put that tweet out, there was going to be a reaction. Come on, you had to know.
I didn't give a shit though. I don't really give a shit at all. Like I'm done giving any shits at all about any of it.
So I'm going to throw you a tiny curveball that I didn't tell you this morning. You know who I think is responsible for Kirk Herbstreit talking that boldly?
Pat McAfee.
Take one guess. Oh, exactly. That's exactly what is transpired. I got to give Pat McAfee credit. Yes. He has made Kirk Herbstreit go, hold on, man. They're paying me a lot of money and they don't have anybody to replace me. You know, I can say what I want, and if people want to get upset about it, like, what's ESPN going to do about it? They don't have another Kirk Herbstreit. Their college football coverage would go in the toilet, and so yes, Pat, I got hats off to Pat McAfee for giving guys over at ESPN a pair of balls, and I hope that others over at ESPN follow if they're bulletproof. Troy Aikman's bulletproof, Joe Buck's bulletproof. Maybe it'll inspire some other guys.
You know who you're naming? White dudes. That's what Pat McAfee did. He gave white guys a set of balls. Because the black dudes feel like they can say things, particularly when it comes to race, they can say way more than the white guys can. And you've got Kirk Herbstreit, who you and he are pretty close. He's also getting to that age where he's like, hey, man, I don't care. How much longer am I going to be doing this? We'll see. He's a hardcore Christian guy, obviously cares about his faith. He's looking around and he's like, the world's going insane. And this is like such a softball. Hey, should men be playing in women's sports? Yeah, no. And so, if you can look at the polling, a politician could easily take this stance. Look at the polling. Everybody agrees. Yeah, no men in sports. Okay, this is a winning issue. And so, but I agree with you. I had thought about the Pat McAfee thing this morning, and I was going to bring that up. Look at the stuff that Pat McAfee has been able to do. Norby Williamson got fired because Pat McAfee wanted him fired. And he was, as you know, a power broker at ESPN for a time. He's able to have Aaron Rodgers on in the height of the COVID madness, and it just doesn't matter. He can do whatever he wants, and he doubles down, and they take him off the air. Okay, that's enough. And then he brings him back the next week because he doesn't care. And anytime somebody tries to tell Pat McAfee, hey, man, you can't do that, he says, yeah, watch me. And then, even down to he called Caitlin Clark a white bee. Oh, well, that's just Pat. And so he's opened up so much space to be able to do whatever. And it's just sort of this frat boy white guy. And Kirk's looking around and he's like, I am College Game Day. I get it, Pat's come in, but it's like when you think of College Game Day, you think of Kirk Herbstreit. And when you think of college football, you think of Kirk Herbstreit. He's irreplaceable. He's got to be looking around going, okay, I'm allowed to talk.
He indicated, because I don't know if we played the entire clip, but he indicated that he may have more to say about more things than just men playing girls' sports. And so do you expect him, if given the opportunity, let's say over the next 6 months during the course of the college football season, you think he'll say anything else controversial between now and then?
Yeah, it's interesting. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that'll wander into election stuff to me, just generally. Kirk Herbstreit's such a company man. He is the exact guy you would want to hire. He toes the company line. He basically keeps his mouth shut. He's got his opinions, He never does anything to make the company look bad. He always has a smile on. When you think of Kirk Herbstreit, you think of happy thoughts. He does everything perfect. He doesn't seem like the guy that'll wander into politics, but he did say, hey, Lee Corso used to give a speech to everybody, and he would say, hey, look, you talk about anything except for race, religion, and politics. And it seems like that's all anybody talks about now. It seemed like he's signaling to us, I got thoughts on that too, guys, and I'm done caring what everybody thinks. So who knows, Jason? Maybe we'll make an appearance on Fearless with Jason Whitlock one of these days.
Don't know if that'll happen, but what could happen, we're in an election cycle, and there could be something that happens where athletes start taking a knee or start protesting or start commenting on something in the political sphere or in the criminal justice sphere. And I just don't, what I can predict is if there's a George Floyd 2.0, I don't think Kirk Herbstreit's going to cry on air about it. How about that? I just don't think he'll cry again.
Yeah, I think he's certainly feels like he's done going along with the racial hoaxes, and that time passed. And look, who knows what everybody would have done in that position? I guess you were in that position. The average person was not to know how you'd react after the aftermath of George Floyd. But I remember talking to my brother, and both of us didn't believe a word of it in real time. We're like, it feels like something's changing here. Why is everybody acting like suddenly America is this terribly racist place? And we just went back to 1850. Forget 1960. We went back to 1850 overnight, and everybody changed. And it was for about 3 months or 4 months or whatever it was, maybe a year. And everybody kind of reverted back to the norm of like, nah, that ain't real. And that dude overdosed on fentanyl. And so I agree with you. I think he fell for it partially in real time.
So let me give you a little bit more where I think he could end up saying some things, because he told Dockage, like, hey, I don't have any daughters. I have 4 sons. And so if I'm a 54-year-old man with 4 sons, that means they're probably between the ages of 18 and 24, or maybe 16 and 24, or I don't know. But if I had 4 white sons and I was looking at a country that was saying white men are evil and the worst people on the planet, I think if I had 4 sons, I'd have something to say about that.
Boy, you better have a pair to go there. There aren't many. You know,
you
the
just
only
sit
guy
back and let
the only guy I can think of, because look, there is a line too, and you tweet about this, where you say, guys, particularly you white men, don't put yourself up on that cross. That's where Jesus belongs. So there is a place where you're like, hey, I'm not the victim either, but you got to say something. So there's a line to play, and I go through that in my head. I'm certainly not afraid to defend white men. I am a white man, and I've got a son, and hopefully several more coming. But you don't want to play the victim either. So you end up having to just point out obvious, crazy things that people are saying without trying to be the victim. The only guy that I see that does it well is Matt Walsh. I mean, I can't think of another guy that does it really well. Matt Walsh picks his spots. He doesn't play the victim. He's like the most pragmatic guy talking about it, but he's really the only one, and he's an expert as it relates to debating people and on social media and such. And if you're not one, you can find yourself in a pickle in a hurry.
In a different way, I think I'd put Charlie Kirk in that lane as well. With Matt Walsh, he does it a little differently, but he's certainly not scared. But I'm just, if I was a father of 4 and I was white, I'm certainly not going to go to my grave thinking, hey, this whole country thinks that my seeds are evil and can't be redeemed and are racist and are a threat to society. I'd do something to fight that narrative. I wouldn't want to leave that burden to my kids, but that's y'all's problem, TJ, not mine.
I do think he's figured out.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You can't
Go ahead.
ally yourself into being hated. That is what he has figured out, because he tried that in 2020. You can't be a good enough ally for them to stop hating people who look like you and your kids. There is no like, hey, the Herbstreits and their boys, they're fine. So you can't ally your way into protection. He's figured that out, and so put a helmet on. It's time to fight.
Thank you, TJ. Great job as always. Make sure you're getting your Fearless Army swag. shopblazemedia.com/fearless. Tennessee Harmony, and a discussion about Kirk Franklin, who seemed to say some things that were anti-marriage, saying that, I think he was marriage is being weaponized or whatever. Anyway, we'll get into it with Virgil, Anthony, and Kevin next.
How does the cloud work?
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house.
Okay.
It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud.
Oh, there's a big surprise. That's an incredible. I think I'm going to have a heart attack and die from that surprise.
That exists above us, right? It's no longer in a physical place.
You're a goddamn genius. That's the most outstanding answer I've ever heard. You must have a goddamn IQ of 160.
All right, welcome back. Time for some Tennessee Harmony. Anthony, Virgil, Kevin here with me. Anthony, if you could start us with prayer.
Father God, we thank you for your word. It is such a revelation to us on each and every day. Help us to live by your word and to share it with all we know. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, guys. Kirk Franklin captured on tape saying something interesting, something that blew my mind, but I don't want to give away too much, but it didn't blow Anthony's mind. Anthony's got a pretty provocative point of view on this. But without further ado, let me show you what Kirk Franklin said in an interview, I believe, with Cam Newton, an interesting person to be having this discussion with. They were talking about marriage, or they got on the topic of marriage. Anyway, listen to Kirk Franklin.
I believe that marriage has been weaponized in Western Christianity. Giving has been weaponized in Western Christianity. Sexuality has been weaponized. For example, and any woman listening to this can attest in our culture, don't be no 30, 35-year-old single black woman and go to the family reunion. All the older women are gonna do nothing. They're gonna look at you and wonder and question you and challenge you on what? Why you not married?
Where your man at? Where your kids at? All that.
Like it's a prerequisite for identity and value that if you don't have a man, if you don't have kids, that something about you is broken. Do you understand how dysfunctional these messages are?
Yeah.
And how we super spiritualize these messages. Paul said, but marriage is a necessary distraction. I have many friends that were in ministry at church, and the church has told them, if you're gonna be in ministry, you can't be single. We're not gonna let you work with the youth ministry if you're single. You can't do this if you're single. And so what people do, they quickly get married, thinking that they're fulfilling God's will for their lives, but they are fulfilling man's dogma. You can be single and be used by God. You can be single and have purpose. Being married is not a prerequisite for God's hand on your life. It is not, but we've weaponized it. And then crucify people, where my camera at?
Right there.
And then crucify people when those same marriages fail.
So we're going to save Anthony for last because I think he'll give us some new ways to look at this conversation. I'm going to start us off by just saying he's talking to Cam Newton, who I believe has at least 3 baby mamas. He ain't married none of them. And so I find it interesting that he'd be talking to someone who has been as sexually irresponsible as Cam Newton, and Cam Newton is the choir, yeah, preach, I ain't got to get married, and blah, blah, blah. That's off-putting to me. And then just and again, I know we're just playing clips. We're not playing the full context of his conversation, but I just think you have to be aware of like, we got a marriage crisis in the black demographic. And you know, we're paying a price for that marriage crisis. And he seems to be justifying, because it seems like everybody already agrees with Kirk Franklin's position. You ain't got to get married. You can serve God's purpose, blah, 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 blah. And we actually need someone pushing the other direction. So I was off-put by this. Having said that, I didn't hear the entire conversation, so maybe there's more layers to it. But Virgil, I'm going to have you fire first, then Kevin, and then Anthony will help give us larger context. Virgil?
Yeah, this is interesting conversation. Having this conversation, Kirk Franklin having this conversation with Cam Newton, I think the point you made is the right one. You're preaching to the choir, someone who doesn't want to get married. When we look at just statistics, and you said it's happening in the black community, the issue of marriage is happening throughout the country in all cultures and all ethnic groups. The average age for women to marry is about 27.8, which is higher than it's ever been before in our country. So white women and black women going to the cookout, if you're 35 and you don't have a man and there are no prospects, you're going to be asked questions. And that's a positive thing. That's a positive pressure to challenge you, to see what's going on and to ask questions. When you look at black culture, you've often heard the saying that if white culture catches a cold, black culture gets the flu. Well, as it pertains to the issue of marriage, that's absolutely true. 1 in 4 black women will actually marry within their lifetimes. So if marriage has been, quote unquote, weaponized, it's a poor weapon. because it's not being effectively utilized in Black culture in any way, shape, or form. So this is really what's at stake. I think he's throwing up kind of these air balls and getting the amen choir from Cam Newton. It's not a power. None of the statements that he's making are very powerful in any way, shape, or form. They're absolutely the opposite.
Well, the great thing about the internet is that anyone can have a voice and you can hear any conversation. The bad thing about the internet is everyone's got a voice, right? So this is a conversation that may have taken place at a barbershop between a few guys or at a diner or something, and a guy's kind of mouthing off, not making any sense, but people are just agreeing with them. And I think we're just getting a window into this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I love what Virgil said, air balls. Weaponized, what are you talking about? You know, like, part of the culture is to be married at some point. I mean, it's usually people's goals, especially women's goals. Like, every woman has a princess fantasy. Disney was built on the princess fantasy that you're going to be rescued by some knight in shining armor or by some prince or something like this.
I'm not saying I agree, but they would argue that was a mistake. Let's don't take that fantasy away.
Yeah,
it's
but
fantasy, it's not reality.
But what I'm saying is, he's saying Christianity has weaponized it. I'm saying if anything's weaponized, it's the culture at large. And why is that? You know, why at 30, 35 are women concerned about getting married? Well, because your biological clock is ticking. And if you want to have children, you better start thinking about finding a man who will commit to you and protect you and provide for you and your family. So it's just part of our normal culture. I think him using the word weaponize is going way too far. I think he's just making that up to be, you know, he's just exaggerating it to create some drama. But yeah, I don't agree with anything he said. I think he's just being hyperbolic, so to speak.
Hey, Dub.
I don't see Kirk as teaching against marriage. He's given some scriptural pieces, and some of those I don't agree with biblically. But objectively, from the book, there's nothing wrong with singleness. Just on its face, there's nothing wrong with that. And if we have that approach that someone being single means there's a problem or there's something wrong, then we can misapply a solution. Marriage isn't a solution to a problem. Marriage is a covenant relationship with God and with the other person. And when Paul teaches about marriage in 1 Corinthians or even in Ephesians, every time he's referencing marriage, it's related to Christ, God, and the church. So if I want to understand anything about marriage, I got to know who God is. I got to know who Christ is, and I need to know who the church is, what the church is. I need to understand that, because that gives me a lens as to what God sees marriage as. Just telling people to get married, if they're not spiritually ready, if they're not mature, we're making more mistakes. So approaching someone being single, my issue would not be, why are you not married? I'm still listening to, hey, how is your relationship with God? Like, what's going on? What's happening in your life? And that will give me an indication as to what they think about marriage. But just to, on its face, just to get people to get married. Now, let me back up. Are the marriage numbers abysmal? Yes. As it relates to the Black community, yes. But again, just telling these folk to get married can exacerbate the issue. You got two young folk who, you know, are in lust and they produce a child. Okay, the pressures of family, pressures of the church. Hey, y'all need to get married. Y'all need to, and some of that may come up from a good place of we want the child to come up in a good home with a mother and father. But if those people aren't godly and they don't have any godly or spiritual aspirations, you can be exacerbating an issue. So that's where I'm saying some of what Kirk is saying here is true. Can God use you as a single person? Yeah. I mean, he used Paul. Paul was single. Now, Paul does warn. He says, hey, the singleness that he said, I've got a gift in this. He was celibate. So if you are single and celibate and you're okay in that space and you recognize that family and children and sex being within marriage, which is how God designed it, you're okay with that, there's a space for you in the kingdom. But if you're wanting to have sex, if you want to have a child, et cetera, then hey, we need to start preparing ourselves spiritually for marriage.
So, and Virgil, hop back here or piggyback off this, but you started out with nothing wrong with singleness.
Correct.
Which I would agree with.
Yeah.
But there can be something wrong with singleness. People need to explore the why are you single? And that's what I think people, maybe at a family reunion or a family gathering, hey, why are you single? What's going on? I think that's an appropriate question because I think my singleness is wrong. And it's because why I'm single is because I was an idiot. I wanted to be sexually promiscuous, which is part of my idiocy. And I didn't understand all the benefits of marriage. And so I think that because I'll tell you, and it's like I'm just now fully coming into this understanding of just myself. It's like I've never equated happiness with marriage, and so I didn't. So foolishly, I was like, I don't need marriage to be happy. I can be happy all by myself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm. And so when you define marriage as we have inappropriately as a culture, this is the way to be happy.
Right.
It doesn't compute. And so we need to actually tell people why you need to be married. Here are the actual benefits. It's not happiness, it's fulfillment, it's purpose, it's discipline. It's going to keep you away from all these other mistakes. You're going to be held accountable by another person, and your journey, your spiritual journey, will be enhanced by sharing it with another person and being equally yoked with that person. We don't explain any of that. Mostly we tell people, this is part of your happiness deal. And then there'll be some smart person like me that foolishly smart, but just smart, like, well, no, I don't actually need this woman to be happy. I can be happy all by, but all these other things that I'm missing out on that I had to get to, in my 50s, figure out like, holy cow, what an idiot you were. No one ever explained that to me. So I think why people are single is very important.
Yes.
And it may be like, well, that's why it's wrong, Jason. See, Jason, you made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
You're wrong. Anyway, Virgil.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. The other thing is, as it relates to someone choosing singleness or being single, you have to explore the reasons and rationale why. Unfortunately, in the Black community, particularly, you have women who've been told, girl, you don't need no man. You go get your education, you go get this, you go get that, and don't worry about no man. That man will come later. Well, what we've done is we've prioritized singleness and have chosen singleness for the wrong reasons, because you don't trust a man who'll come along and take care of you and be the provider, be the protector, and be the man that he's supposed to be. So that has run rampant in our communities. I've just written 2 articles, both of them with the same title, just switch man for woman. I said five reasons why a woman should marry, 5 reasons why a man should marry. The whole point of the article was to do exactly what you said, Jason, which was to explain to people the benefit that we're going to find in marriage. And you're right. Marriage is not about your happiness. Marriage is about holiness. It's about being with another sinner just like you, being conformed into the image of Christ, as you have to walk through issues of forgiveness, understanding that the selfishness that you have in your life needs to be addressed, understanding that you need to give yourself to another person. That's why we have Ephesians chapter 5, which tells husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. It's all for those reasons that we have the issue of marriage. At the end of the day, I think as it relates to Kirk Franklin, the real issue was his attack was not necessarily against marriage as much as it was against standards. From the very outset of his conversation with Kirk Cameron, he wanted to mute the standards, any standard that Christianity held up, whether it was for marriage in this instance or the LGBTQ, mafia. He wanted to walk back the standards, and so he said, the church has weaponized marriage, giving, and the LGBTQIA plus, community. Well, he's saying we shouldn't have standards as it relates to those things because people kind of come at God in their own way. He started out the conversation with Cam Newton in that way, saying that his spirituality, his spiritual journey was different. So this is no different. He's doing it in a way that's not beneficial to the audience that they're addressing. They already have abandoned marriage, and we need to get it back and do things rightly and give the right reasons for people to marry.
It's cultural. You know, what Virgil's saying is the standard is cultural. We speak English because we were raised in a culture that speaks English. That's the only reason we speak English. I grew up in a neighborhood where my father was married, everyone was married. There was almost no divorce in my neighborhood. Now, I grew up in a really nice suburb of Washington, D.C., leave it to Beaverville almost. But I didn't know divorce. And I looked up to my father. I idolized my father. I idolized my mother. So I wanted to live into a culture just like they had provided for me, you know, with brothers and sisters, a nice home. And so I said, wow, I want to grow up to be like my dad. I want to find the right woman. And I was single until my early 40s because I wasn't going to make the mistake of settling down just to settle down. Even though my faith and my culture said, yeah, marriage is the way you should go, I still had my own standards and said, okay, I'm going to wait and I'm going to pray until I find the right woman. Yeah. And from a Catholic perspective, which I was raised Catholic, you know, it's a covenant and it's what we call a sacrament. So this is something, one of the 7 sacraments that you look forward to. And within Catholicism, they say as well, because it's biblical, it's okay to be single. And there's a path for people to be single as well. You can become a nun, you can become a monk, you can become a priest. And so there's a path for those people to follow as well. But there is power in being single. But really, it's cultural. I was raised that, hey, marrying the woman you love, committing your life to her, as a sacrament and as a covenant, that's what you want to look forward to. And then hopefully...
For non-Catholics, just define sacrament.
A sacrament is basically, so baptism is considered a sacrament. First communion is considered a sacrament. Penance or asking for forgiveness is considered a sacrament. This is basically just a framework that you go through. It's almost like rites within the faith. It's like, okay, I'm looking forward to marriage one day. I'm looking forward to communion one day. So it's basically just gives us a framework to keep the standards and the community together. And they're all biblical. And so yeah.
So just a dictionary, a religious ceremony or ritual regarded as imparting divine grace, such as baptism, anyway, so penance, and the anointing of the sick. Anyway, Anthony, did you want to hop back in?
I do want to hop back in. When we talk about how things have changed as it relates to marriage and in teaching, you looked at how, man, these areas that you had in your life that were undisciplined, that were ungodly, and you say for yourself, you're like, man, I should be married, me not have been married. These were the reasons why not. Imagine had Jason just gotten married 20 years ago, just married. You still have a holiness issue. You still have an undisciplined life, but you now have a spouse. So if you don't have a right relationship with God, that marriage is going to be messed up. And that was one of the things that Kirk Franklin illustrates. Like if we just get folk married and they don't have these things, those issues are still going to remain. I'm looking at, like I said, I don't know all of Kirk's theology on marriage, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the issues that I had with him in this clip is when you give a soundbite answer to a comprehensive teaching. Marriage is not a soundbite teaching. It's comprehensive. This starts with God and Christ and the church and purpose and plan. All of that's included in marriage. But you give a soundbite answer, you'll get the single Cam Newton who, hey, Kirk just said from a biblical perspective, singleness is fine. Kirk is not saying, even in that clip, that fornication is fine, that having multiple kids by multiple women is fine, sex outside of the confines of marriage is fine, but he's not denouncing that. Right. So without giving a comprehensive teaching, he's going to give Cam okay, this is So again, that's my issue, is that soundbite. I'm looking at, though, as a minister, we've got a different culture as it relates to how they view marriage. And you gave a teaspoon of it in your response. A lot of people look at marriage as a pathway to happiness. The problem with that is you'll get two folk who aren't spiritually mature, who aren't personally mature, but they want to be happy. And they get married, and marriage is a work. It's a ministry. And they're not happy. And guess what they do? I got to get a divorce. I'm not happy. This is not and that totally sidelines what God's plan and purpose for marriage is, which, as Virgil points out, to be holy, to be a ministry that teaches the world about Christ and the church through this marriage. So I'm looking at, unless people are dedicated in all of that area as they look towards marriage, we need to push pause on marriage for those two people. I'm saying, as churches, we got to do a better job of preparing people for marriage and countering the anti-marriage sentiment of the world, so that when they do marry, it becomes what God destined it to be.
So I'm going to go back to my original point of, like, he's talking about one of the greatest gifts God gives us, marriage. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about it with someone with a reprobate mind and reprobate lifestyle, who's a football player. And so where can the conversation really go? And so you're Kirk Franklin. You're a gospel singer. Doesn't he call himself some kind of lightweight minister? Doesn't he?
He teaches, yeah.
And so it's like, I'm going to go talk about one of the most important foundational things that God gives us.
Yeah.
With an NFL quarterback with 3 or 4 baby mamas. There's no way to unpack that conversation properly in that environment. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and so he needs to be having that conversation and enough respect for the institution of marriage to say, this ain't really it, Cam. You do a lot of cursing on your show. You're living a lifestyle that, it would be hard for me to fully unpack. And so I agree with you, Anthony. And what I'm getting at is, like, we have foundational problems.
Yeah.
That if we, and so we have to, and that's why the book starts with "in the beginning." Seriously, it does. And so that's, if we're going to fix the problem, we have to go in the beginning, and we have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, like, because we haven't started from scratch, people don't even know what marriage is about.
Yeah.
And so if Jason Whitlock, as a kid going to church, was getting the foundation laid about the importance of marriage. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not disparaging my mother or grandmother, but my grandmother got divorced young, never got remarried. Love her to death. My mother got divorced, never remarried. So, and not huge proponents of marriage, because bitterness and whatever else. Mm-hmm. And so the foundation's never laid right at the church level in terms, because we've all just fallen into this belief, or many of us have, foolishly, that, marriage, happiness. Does he make you happy, girl? That's like the number one question.
Yeah.
Does he make you happy, girl?
Yeah.
Oh, happy?
Yeah.
Is that man going to provide for you? Is he going to protect you? Is he going to be responsible and get a job and show up on time and blah, blah, be reliable? Is that man, do you think, is he going to cheat on you? Blah, blah. Is he? But we're sitting around, well, he makes me happy. And, man, you should have seen us twerking at the club last weekend. I was so happy. Man, we twerk better than anybody. And let's get married. And so foundationally, my understanding of marriage, very weak. And I had to live 50 some odd years before realizing the brilliance and the importance of it. Virgil, I'm rambling. Go ahead, hop back in.
No, Kirk is pretty emblematic of what preachers are providing. Unfortunately, a lot of black preachers and black churches are saying to their congregants. You got a bunch of single women. They don't want to say anything that hurts their feelings. They want to say something that'll get an amen. There's no standard. We've removed all the standards. There was no admonition to Cam for him to stop creating all these baby mamas, to think about the fact that marriage is a God-honoring institution that he should consider with great thought, with great care, with great concern, as Anthony kind of laid out, but also from a standpoint of none of us are perfect. We're not going to be perfect human beings before we enter into marriage. And so we have to recognize that we are marrying someone who is indeed a sinner. We too are sinners. We go into that with grace. We can because God has graced us, and we walk out what God has given us. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we leave. Just because there's problems don't mean we run. We stick with it. We understand that this is the lot that God's given, but it's better with two of us together than each of us alone, apart, and wanting to have or looking for something more because we've ignored what God has designed.
And so to me, it's like if you go into something with the right expectations, even if it's difficult, you have a much better chance of surviving it and actually do it. And so it's like, oh, I signed up to play football at Warren Central High School, and there's going to be 2-a-day practices, and they're going to run us to death, and I got to keep my grades at this level, and blah, 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 blah. And it's hard. And then you get a little reward on Friday night to play the game for 2.5 hours. And then the rest of it's just hard. And then you get to play again on Friday night. And then you go through an off season where they make you lift weights and run and do all this other stuff. It ain't none of that fun. Just so you can get to the football season, and for 3 months and for 12 games or 11 games, you can have fun every Friday, 11 times a year. That's kind of what marriage is like, but it's so rewarding and it's so beneficial, and it toughens you up as a man playing football and prepares you to take on the world. If we went into marriage with that type of expectation, man, this is going to be so rewarding, and it's going to make you such a great warrior for Jesus Christ. It's going to benefit your parents. It's going to benefit your siblings, and blah blah blah. Then you have it, but if we go into it looking for happiness, astronomical divorce rate, and you'll end up just not getting married because you'll figure out, well, this guy only makes me happy 11 times a year.
Wow.
This woman only makes me 11 times a year. Why would I do that? If I keep jumping around from guy to guy, maybe I can increase that to 30 times a year.
You see what's happening. That's what's happening. Wow.
Well, anyway, that's all I got. Y'all got any more?
I'm good, man.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. We'll play some Harmony, and we'll see you tomorrow.
So divided, stop fighting and stand tall. We used to be a nation, one united. Now we're headed for downfall. God, let your light shine down. What we need more than anything now, harmony. Let's make a simple vow. Let's come together now. Harmony. Put all your weapons down. Love one another now. Time for us to wake up. Choose love, my sister, my brother. See through the lies they tell us.